Right, so hi everybody. Today I just want to talk to you about how to best cultivate your web presence for your career. So in terms of the aims of this presentation, obviously the whole session today is geared towards helping you with your future career goals and to applying to the jobs that you want, whether it be in industry or academia. And I'm hoping that this will give you a good idea about some of the different things you can do to cultivate your web presence successfully for the type of career that you want. So where should we start? If you are looking to cultivate your web presence, the first thing you need to do is to understand what current presence you actually have. The best way to do this is to Google yourself in incognito mode so that you can see what anybody else could see if they were looking for you. Now, I appreciate that I do have a fairly unique surname, which does help, although I have also spent a lot of time cultivating my web presence. So when you Google Samantha Kanza, this is the first set of results, and they are all me. But let's look for somebody else with a less unique name. So if I search for just Nicola Knight, unfortunately, I don't get Nikki. However, if I search for Nicola Knight Southampton, as it's very common to search for people with their institution, particularly if they have a more common name, most of these results are now Nikki, apart from the third one. So I'd recommend trying a few different options to find yourself and see what happens. Now, once you've done this, there are two important questions. Firstly, how visible are you? And secondly, how happy are you with your visibility? If somebody was looking for you, how easy would it be for them to find you? And are you actually happy with what they find? If it's not easy to find you, then you really need to work on making a much bigger presence for yourself. And if you aren't happy with what you find, then you need to consider locking down or removing that material. If looking for you comes up with, say, your MySpace record from 2008, that might potentially not reflect on the person you are now. And you might want to think about removing that, or at least severely hiding it. The rest of this presentation is now going to cover some of the different ways in which you can build up your web presence, depending on whether you're in academia or industry, along with some general advice for both. So thankfully, for most of you, we do not live in the deep, dark days of Web 1.0, where only the very experienced developers could create a web presence for themselves. There are now so many ways that you can get onto the web and make your presence known. One of the main big ways is via social media. Now, obviously, there are loads of different types of social media, and each platform can be used both for work and social aspects. It just depends what your job is. For example, if you create a lot of visual content, either physically or virtually, you could use Instagram for your work. Equally, you could use it to share pictures of your cats or your coffee art privately, which is personally what I do, although I don't make the coffee art myself. I just share other people's if they give it to me on my coffee cup. You could try and go viral on YouTube with a funny video or music video or something, or you could upload videos of yourself presenting. For example, this video is going to go on our YouTube channel. You could probably use TikTok for something, but I don't really know what that is, so we'll steer away from that, apart from maybe some questionable videos. But however, as we are gearing this session towards scientists, I'm mostly going to focus on LinkedIn and Twitter, as these are commonly used both in academia and industry for this domain. So let's talk about LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a fantastic tool for networking and cultivating your web presence and for finding a job. Sarah mentioned having a master CV. Well, LinkedIn can also function as that kind of master CV because you can put everything on there. And then you can always draw different bits when you're making up a specific CV for a specific job application. LinkedIn is really useful whether you're in academia or industry. Having a good up-to-date LinkedIn profile is not only a great accompaniment to your CV, but it just has all those additional bits of information that you might not either be able to fit on your CV if you are trying to keep it down to that 2 pages, or that just you wouldn't necessarily put on a CV either way, but that you still might want potential recruiters to see about you. So CV based, you could add all of your experience and keep an up-to-date record of this. And again, as you get older, as you get more experienced, as you have more jobs, you might end up having a lot of different roles, a lot of different things that won't necessarily fit on your CV, but you could put them all on your LinkedIn profile. So you can provide potentially a fuller history than you might on your CV. You can also list all your skills and you can get endorsed for them, which adds credibility. And you can get your colleagues and bosses to write you recommendations. So now this isn't just a case of you saying, well, I can do this. you've then got additional credibility by other people have come in and either written you recommendations or have endorsed you and said, yeah, I know that person can do that. You can log your achievements, awards, and publications. So again, this means you can have a full log of everything. So if a recruiter or prospective employer was looking, they could see all these additional things. And once your publications get over a certain level, even if on an academic CV, you aren't necessarily going to list all of them, but it is one of the places you could put all that information. And then any awards or sort of additional things, it's always nice to put those on there as well. You can also create content and posts for LinkedIn. So again, this kind of gives you that remit to share your achievements. You can let people know what you're up to. You can use hashtags on posts similar to Twitter to get further engagement, so people might find them when they search. And you can get colleagues to share information and comment on them if you're trying to raise exposure. And again, this could kind of add a bit of personality to you if somebody's looking you up. It's not just here's your CV and here's all the other things you've done. It's here's things you're actually actively up to. They can see some interaction. It's a way of kind of networking, but on a more professional level than, say, Facebook. Now, I'm not going to go into crazy detail about networking, as I'm sure Kevin's going to cover this in his presentation. But just to touch on it briefly, LinkedIn is also great for networking, and make sure you use it to build your connections. So when you meet people at conferences or meetings, if you collaborate with people, your fellow students, lecturers, add them all on LinkedIn. It is fantastic to expand your network. And remember, the more contacts you have, the more potential opportunities there are. So when you hit over the magic 1,000, which I have managed to do, it is very nice to have that really wide group of people, not only just to share your content with, they'll see your posts, etc., but then you've got people to look through if you want to find somebody for a job or a collaboration, etc. You can also use LinkedIn to show that you're open for jobs and what type of jobs you want. So Jeremy, for those who don't know, that's my boss. If you are watching this, don't worry, I haven't actually got this turned on. I just wanted to show people what it looks like. So if you're doing this, obviously it's vital to make sure you have a really informative, presentable profile, so that when recruiters find you, if they're actually actively searching for people who are looking for jobs, then they can see what you're all about. And it's useful to provide as much detail as possible with respect to the types of jobs and locations you're looking for. But also be honest, there's no point saying you're open to a job 100 miles away if you have no intention of moving. Though hopefully now with a sort of more remote climate, that'll be less of an issue anyway. Now, of course, there is also Twitter. And, we love Twitter. This is quite commonly used in both academia and industry. I'd say it's good to get a Twitter profile early on, so you can build up your connections and your followers. So the screenshot on this slide shows our network Twitter, because we put a lot of work into keeping this active. Obviously, a key thing about Twitter is hashtags. So if you're posting about specific topics, you can actually look up sort of the most popular hashtags to boost your exposure on your tweets. So for example, in our area, I know that AI, ML, artificial intelligence, and machine learning are all very popular. So when you look it up, you can actually see how many tweets have recently gone with that hashtag per hour. So I tend to always involve those in our posts if they're actually about AI and machine learning, which given our network, they normally are. You can also increase exposure of your posts by tagging people so that it comes up on their newsfeed. And you can use catchy images to draw people's eyes to your posts. And Twitter also enables you to add alt text to your images, so you can make them more accessible as well. So you can build up your Twitter presence. If you attend conferences, you could live tweet about that. You might have noticed we tend to live tweet about all of our speakers to, again, get people's engagement up in what we're doing. You can tweet about subjects you're interested in. You can actually follow hashtags and then see what people are talking about, get involved in that conversation, maybe bring on some new followers there. And it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, if you have Twitter, other people can then tag you and connect with you. So when we run our events, we tend to always tweet about our speakers. And if they've got Twitter, then it increases their exposure because people can see they're speaking in our events, so we put up their videos. It all kind of adds to building up your profile there. However, just a note of caution for Twitter and indeed all social media, be careful. Firstly, it's always wise to stay upfront on your profile. Your opinions are your own, just in case you end up in a Twitter argument. Personally, I would recommend avoiding those, but everyone to their own. But just remember, Twitter is a public forum. And if you've set your profile to public, anybody can find it and see your tweets. So just be sensible, because you don't just want a present web presence, you want a good web presence. You don't want a web presence, again, going back to, would you be happy with what people can find about you? So you do need to think about that and think, would I actually be okay with a prospective employer seeing what I've said about this? Or even just, do I think this reflects well on me as a person? And if the answer is no, you might not want to put that up there. And it is also just worth thinking about whether you want your Twitter to be job-based, personal-based, or both. And like, depending on that answer, you might want to align your content accordingly, or even have a personal and a professional account that are separate. So another way that you can make your mark web presence-wise is via websites and web pages. So you can always create your own personal website or blog. And also, if you are working for a company or you're a student at a university, I don't think they offer this for undergrads, but they'll definitely offer it for PhD students, or if you're staff at a university, get a profile on your institutional website as well. So for personal websites or blogs, there's a number of options. If you want to learn web development or you're already a web developer, you can obviously build it from scratch if you feel so inclined. But for anyone who isn't, there are plenty of options such as WordPress, Google Sites, and many other site building programs. Ideally, I would recommend getting your own domain, as this looks a lot more professional, and then you can get an email address with that as well. But you can use a personal website to showcase your work. You can link through to all of your profiles, such as LinkedIn and Twitter. You can produce portfolios of your code, your papers, your projects, or any other content you've created. You could also put this in the form of a blog if you wanted to do something that was a bit more regularly updated rather than more static, although you should of course always keep things up to date anyway. It is quite common for PhD students, for example, to set up blogs and kind of detail that PhD journey. I would say, if you're going to do it, make sure you do it well. So again, kind of going back to Sarah's, make sure you proofread, make sure it looks professional. If you're either put the time into making a professional looking website and check it works across different browsers, check it looks good on a phone, as a lot of people look at things on their phones nowadays, or stick to using other services such as LinkedIn to showcase your details. As a bad website could create a bad impression, which is the opposite of what you're trying to cultivate. Similarly, with the original Googling yourself, if you make a website, check that it's findable. Make sure you include the right metadata and search terms for indexing so that you can optimize how search engines prioritize your website. And make sure you provide your contact details or links to places where people can get in touch with you, so that if your website does make a good impression, someone can actually get hold of you. As for company or university websites, sometimes when you start a company particularly, you'll actually be asked to provide the details for your profile. If you're not asked, but you can search, check that they have one. If not, maybe query that, and then talk to your boss or talk to your IT department and ask what you need to do to get your profile on that website. So for us, I inquired when I started as staff because I had a PhD profile, but I knew that would disappear and I wanted a staff profile, and I was told I had to fill in a form, and then they create the web page with all those details. And ours is actually pretty neat because it automatically pulls in all of our publications, which is fantastic because I don't need to do that. It just all does it behind the scenes. And particularly if people are going to be looking for you linked to where you work, having a profile on their webpage is a pretty surefire way of making sure that somebody can find you. As even if you aren't planning to change jobs, it's always quite useful for people to be able to find you if they want to collaborate with you, or just to, add a bit of credibility to who you are. And then if you do come around to changing jobs, then it's an additional credible profile for people to have a look at. Now, if you're planning on working in academia or industry or any kind of area that involves producing publications, then it is a really good idea to have scholarly profiles as well. So the ones on this slide are kind of the main ones that are linked to publishing. So ORCIDs are fantastic. I love ORCID basically about as much as I love LaTeX and the Semantic Web. So if you think that you may ever want to publish something, you should get one. ORCIDs are unique persistent identifiers for all of your publications and your content. So this means that even if you don't have a unique name, you can uniquely identify all of your publications to you. And it's a place where you can collate all of them together, irrespective of whether you've moved between institutions, changed email address, changed other details, changed your name, your title, it's still all you. It also means that people can also then find a bit more out about you if they look at your ORCID profile via your publications. So that's always nice. Typically, when you submit journal papers, you'll be given the option to add your ORCID. And for many institutional repositories, so ours certainly allows this, you can automatically link it in, which means that then all of your outputs So, we don't just have publications as outputs, we have all of these videos and other reports we produce for our projects. All of them will automatically get linked to your ORCID profile. So you're building up a really nice collection there. There are also other professional networks like Researchgate and academia.edu. Personally, I'm actually on Researchgate, but I think both are pretty similar. So these networks allow you to share your research easily with other researchers. Again, it's another place to collate all of your research, and you can actually follow other researchers or be followed by them. So there's some general social media aspects there, kind of having followers, you can communicate with people via messages, etc. But whereas obviously LinkedIn is a bit more for kind of professional networking and actually talking to people, Researchgate tends to be a bit more about sharing that research aspect. People can request full text from you, which is particularly useful if they're looking to read your work but can't locate a copy. It's also a place you can publish your preprints, so you can get your work out there faster. A nice addition to it as well, just a little bonus, is you can get citation alerts, as it's always lovely to know that somebody has cited your work. Similarly, there is Google Scholar. So if you have lots of publications, then they can all be collated together on your Google Scholar profile. And it's also a good place to get your H index, which is a papers published and number of citations based metric. You can also set it up to automatically update your records if Google Scholar locates any publications it thinks belong to you. The other great thing about this is everyone can see your Google Scholar record without needing to be a member of any network. So if you are applying for any research-based jobs, being able to link your prospective employer to your Google Scholar profile can be really useful. Another really useful place to cultivate your web presence if you want to work with code is GitHub. So briefly, Git is a version control system and GitHub is a web interface and repository for Git. If you want to know more about Git, then you can go back to our YouTube channel and listen to Sam's wonderful introduction to Git and GitHub that he gave 2 weeks ago. But this is a great way for prospective employees to get a feel for what you can do by looking at your coding projects. So if you are looking to get a job writing software, then consider setting up some public Git repositories to showcase what you can do. So I just want to finish up with some top tips. So firstly, think about trying to separate your personal and your professional presence, and think about what is and isn't public. So personally, I have a very public LinkedIn and Twitter that are completely work focused, whereas my Facebook and my Instagram are very private and locked down. It's a personal preference for everybody, but it really depends on what you care to share with regards to your private life. And it is worth thinking about whether you would want colleagues or prospective employers to see that. Use appropriate photos. There are lots of photos of me drinking cocktails, which I'm very fond of, but I probably wouldn't use any of them in a professional setting. Again, it's about having that slight separation. Also, I always think it can be nice to use consistent photos so people know it's definitely you. As you might have noticed, I use the same photo across all of my professional profiles, and that makes it really easy to identify me. And whilst I don't anymore, I used to change my hair color all the time, and I think that probably could have been quite confusing if I'd had blonde, black-haired and red-haired me in different places. It can be quite difficult to tell that's the same person at times. Also create the right profiles for you. So I would always advise LinkedIn regardless of whether you're in industry or academia. And if you're in academia or an industry that's active in Twitter, then Twitter as well. If you're publishing, get an ORCID and at least set up Google Scholar and think about whether you want your own personal website or blog and what that might add to what you can do on the web. Also, I think it's always good to have a stock photo and up-to-date bio ready to go, because you never know when you might need it for a cover letter or a job application or a conference presentation. And above all, keep your information up to date even when you are employed. So, Sarah talked about having your master CV and keeping that up to date. It's really, really useful to have everything in one place that is completely up to date. And if you do that incrementally, so as you get a new publication, as you get a new job role, as things change slightly, you learn a new skill, it's really good to then put that on your CV so that when you do get to a point where you either need to send someone a CV internally or you are looking to change job role, then it's already there and it's easy just to pull things out. Now, last but not least, I save this till the end because it is the most important. Don't be offensive with your web presence. If prospective employees look at your profiles and come away with a bad impression of you, chances are they are not going to want to hire you. And really nobody wants to be that offensive social media web person. So I hope this has been useful. I'm not entirely sure about time, so I will leave it to Nikki as to whether we're doing any questions.